we can get a microphone to gentlemen. Yep.
Thank you. My name's Tony Katrabai. I work for an international talent acquisition firm here in London, and my question, which is open to all the PMs here, is what are the main skills that, in terms of human capital, that people here wanting to invest in your countries would feel at ease in finding, and also what are the skills that they would have to worry in terms of investing there and not finding the right people? Thank you.
Maybe I should ask you all to answer that in a couple of questions each, quite swiftly. Perhaps I'll start at the far end with Prime Minister's Visic.
Of course, it's a very interesting question, and thank you for that question. Because this is an opportunity to say a couple of words about comparative advantage or advantages of our states. And they are not reflected only in rich natural resources, but in well-educated, high-quality labor force, particularly in those areas where we have tradition from the past. When we talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina, this is the area of wood processing and metal processing industry. There you will always find highly educated, both the labor force and managers in these fields, managers who are capable, by accepting contemporary methods and contemporary principles, of developing such areas. That's why these are the two fastest growing industries in Bosnia and Herzegovina. On the other hand, we are also developing, and we have a serious growth, in the field of IT. And we're developing IT experts who are capable of accepting and facing all the challenges that companies have in this modern IT environment. And that goes for the companies that can develop their capacities in the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Of course, we should not forget the special advantage and special quality, those who work in the military industry. It has the fastest growth in the region, or special purpose industry, and it has great potential for development in technical and technological and professional sense. So I'm talking about the possibility to find high-quality managerial staff and high-quality staff that will support the acceptance and application of modern technologies within the sectors where Bosnia and Herzegovina has very significant competitive advantage. We're talking about the energy sector, traditional industries. We're also talking about agriculture and even about tourism. We just mentioned the renewable energy sources. That's the field where Bosnia and Herzegovina has very significant human resources, human capital, and natural potentials, particularly in the field of hydro energy and wind energy. Thank you.
You have just raised something that I'm absolutely sure bothers us all. And you know that we had that kind of self-management socialism system during 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and at that period we lost our entrepreneurial spirit. In 1990s we lost in a way our working habits, and today I can say it's a bit better situation. At least our people can be dedicated workers, but what we actually need, it's a change of our educational system. I can say it on behalf of the Republic of Serbia, and we need to promote and to invest a lot of our efforts and endeavors into the dual educational vocational system. We need to train our people more. We have talented people in that IT sector, but still we need to do much more on changing our mindsets and, of course, into investing in know-how. And we are good in some spheres, in some areas, but it's not enough. It's not enough, and that's why we need FDIs to such a big extent, because those people, they can teach our people how to work, how to be more responsible, and that's what we actually got in the recent years. But we need it, we desperately need it more and more, and I hope that we'll be able to learn much more from the West, and our people are not worse than all the others, but we need to learn more, we need to work harder, and I'm sure that we'll be able to deliver on that. And I can say that also for our government, and just to reply to that gentleman, that yes, we need to change all our administration's capacities, and it's not easy at all, because we need to do a right sizing within public sector this year in accordance with an IMF agreement. And I can tell you that it's not easy to cut the pensions, it's not easy to cut the public wages. We did it. But when you have to do these layoffs, it's even worse, it's even more difficult. But I hope that we'll be able and capable enough to deliver even on that. But yeah, we need to work much more on that. And that's one of the biggest problems for an entire Balkans. And all those good people, they leave our countries because of small salaries. They go to Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Britain, France, all the other countries, and we cannot satisfy them with 400 or 500 euros monthly salaries. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Prime Minister Rama.
As a matter of fact, is the toughest question we are posed, not simply here, but every day, because at the end, countries do not differ because of what they have, but because of what they know. And Albania, for example, is a very rich country in terms of what we have as resources. We have one of the highest hydropower potentials in Europe. We have minerals. We have fantastic resources, sources of water. We have everything a country would need to be prosperous. But what we lack since so many years is the know-how, and the know-how in all levels. That's why the integration process is fundamental, and sometimes I strongly believe that integration process is better than membership. So it's more important than membership itself, because it's the only tool a country like ours can have to modernize and to change itself and reshape and be able to transform what it has in in prosperity. And the same thing goes for all our countries. I would give the same answer as Alexander, because it's totally the same. Our young people miss skills because for many years education, vocational training was left aside. And one very important part of our education reform is exactly to reopen the path of vocational training based on the German dual system, and to give people the possibility to be trained and to possess craft. We have oil. We have a lot of oil, but just imagine that so far, all the explorations, in all explorations, our people have been employed only for very low skill jobs, and because we miss the upper skill jobs. And the point is that exactly because of that we need more foreign direct investment, because our experience shows that any time that an investor comes, he brings not simply money, but he brings also know-how, and he brings culture of work, and he brings also the space to have more skills. And we would very much wish to see more also in the integration process and in the cooperation with the EU in that sense, because it's the best way to fight youth unemployment, but also the best way to bring the country in an upper level. So if you ask me what is the best skill we have so far, I think it's humor. You know, and it's what have made all of us survive. And I would conclude by telling you, I had a very dear friend. He's not alive anymore, but it's another story. Who married a German woman, and the kids were perfectly bilingual, perfectly. And the parents realized that they would say always in German when it was to give accounts to their parents, and they would laugh only in Albanian. So factually, this is what we can add to the European Union, all of us, some more humor and to make it less annoying and less boring, because it has become really very annoying, you know.
Well, I have to say,
although I don't agree with Boris Johnson, but you know, it has become very annoying.
with our weather, we British certainly know the value of humour to the economy. Anyway, if I could ask you,
it's fundamental, you know. Imagine to invest in a country of pessimists. It's impossible. You know,
well, in that case, I better go to the optimists.
So once again, the optimist. So I'll give you my very optimistic answer in this case. And this is because perhaps I've come from the corporate side, where I've had...
Because you're very young in office. You know.
Well, maybe that's it. But, you know, having worked on the corporate side, and if I look at the investments and where we've seen the investments in manufacturing, I think large corporations, we can invest anywhere in the world. They have the opportunity. You as investors can invest, and it's up to you where you decide. Clear, wherever you invest, talent, you know, an educated workforce, skilled labor is critical. If I look at, and once again, perhaps because I do have the global perspective, and I've been part of a large multinational corporation, but it has decided where it could invest. Investments that have come in Croatia, I can say that it was primarily due to the know-how. If I look at very concrete, in manufacturing in pharmaceuticals, it's an FDA site. Everyone knows US FDA, one of the higher standards. So it's not about low cost. It's not about being cheap. It's about having know-how. Investments in active pharmaceuticals, also chemistry, natural sciences. I think Croatia has a very strong history here. And if I look at here as a comparison, members of my management team back then, we're not only managing Croatia, but we're actually leading the Chinese site as well, which tells you once again about the quality of the individuals and the education system. IT, also one of the centers, one of the three centers globally, US, Israel, Croatia. And once again, IT. Now, having said on the IT, one of the first things that I've commented, I think that it's a gap, though. What I mean by a gap, I think we need more students finishing IT, electrical engineering, because there's a huge demand in this segment. But financial shared services, I think the English, the financial, the core education is solid, but I would agree with my colleagues, there's a huge opportunity for improvement. And if you look at perhaps the academic system going from what is today more of a drill, what I call a drill system, to more of a problem solving, so that students who finish have a better approach in terms of problem solving and are better prepared for the workforce ahead of them. But I also see obviously in engineering, or rather in the energy sector and other sectors, the opportunities that the skilled labor force does provide. But once again, you know, it's huge opportunities for improvement. But on a comparative basis, at least from the experience that I have seen, I think Croatia does very well and can compete from a labor perspective in terms of the skilled labor force.
Thank you. Prime Minister Verstappen.
There is a specific way I would like merely to point out that the process of privatization in Kosovo has created structural unemployment, which on its part guided the market demand. The issue was how to adjust the educational system to the labor market demands at home and possibly even abroad. We have a young population, which is a specific feature vis-à-vis the other countries of the region. Over 50% of the population are up to 26 years of age. It accounts for 1/4 of the population, which is in school. They are students. Of course, the educational system was focused mainly in the banking system, for which there is need for economists, and then in some other areas where there was need for lawyers. The construction industry was also very active during this period. IT sector, where we have a very large number of young people who are creating jobs for themselves. There are great possibilities for self-employment. The mining sector is a sector where we have to work more and to train people to work in this sector. And we see a good development also in agricultural sector. What my colleagues said here is that we have not yet been doing good in vocational training. We have tried to establish cooperation with some other countries, like in Germany, to establish vocational schools and to reform the vocational education system, so that people don't all go for higher education, but also go for vocational education because of the change in the dynamics in the labor market, the need for new professions. The main obstacle for us is, as was specifically referred to by Prime Minister Rama, is the fact that our people cannot move outside the country because of lack of visa regime. There is a limited number of young people who have studied abroad in US or in Europe or even in Great Britain. We haven't had the phenomenon of brain drain. In fact, people are returning to Kosovo to work there. But we want our people to be able to leave the country for educational purposes or other purposes, something that is impossible now that the EU is imposing new conditions on us regarding visa liberalization. Every time we come closer to having visa liberalization, they keep imposing new conditions on us, so we don't know when enough is enough. So far, we have been imposed twice as many conditions as any other country before us, when we think that we have met all the requirements, but they are saying no. So it's very difficult for me to explain to my young people why they cannot leave the Western Balkans and go abroad when other countries have this possibility. We have signed the agreement of stabilization, but it will be without any real value if our young people are not given the possibility to leave the country. For every businessman, what is the significance of having a SAA when a businessman has to wait 3 months to get a visa to go to Europe? So for this, we would kindly ask your understanding and possibly your help.
Za kraj, dvije napomene.
For the very end, I need to give you two observations. Each and every of our Western Balkan societies has numerous problems, and these problems actually are are the best explanation as to why we are at this stage in our approaching the European Union. But what can be a joint common denominator for the development of all Western Balkans societies are two major problems or diseases in the Balkans. One is the lack of high-quality education, and the second is a deficit in the rule of law that we all have. These system-wise deficits must be dealt with as a matter of priority in all of our countries, and then after taking this therapy, we can deal with some specific problems that each and every Western Balkan society has. And another observation that I wanted to make is connected with the question asked by the first gentleman who is actually taking part in this dialogue with us. So, referring to this question, I would like to say the following. It is legitimate to have different interests in the Western Balkans. It's completely legitimate that Europe and the Euro-Atlantic society should have their interests in the Western Balkans, just like some others who have their traditional rights and who do not care very much about the system of values of the European Union and Euro-Atlantic community. And Prime Minister Mr. Vučić reminded us that we should not turn the blind eye to some of our problems. And he's mentioned that in each and every society in the Western Balkans, there are those who are in favor of both sides, so to say. So one should not wonder if there are people who want to keep the Western Balkans on the path of force, myths and conflicts and all these all-time stories. But it is up to us to encourage the European and Euro-Atlantic development of societies of the Western Balkans. If we think along these lines, and we are together on this, it's not just enough to say for the Western Balkans that it has a very good European perspective. I agree that Europe is very much present, never has been so present in the Western Balkans so far. But if we want stability of the Western Balkans, that implies economic development. If we want to have economic development, we must integrate the Western Balkans through infrastructure with the rest of Europe. Without this infrastructure, we are just wasting time. Prime Minister Vučić mentioned this highway, Niš-Pristina is the highway of peace. Any highway in the Western Balkans that crosses the border to another country is a peace highway, owing to our sad Balkan history. So if we want good development and prosperity, we have to go back to this core question or issue. And this issue cannot be dealt up with a single government in the Western Balkans, given the fiscal constraints, and that's why the EBRD is crucial for us. Without the EBRD, we cannot pool resources, but also without the EBRD and the European community, we cannot select the priorities for the infrastructural development of the Western Balkans that will be connected with Western Europe. And we cannot, without the EBRD and the EU, design these financial models that would overcome the financial problems of each and every of our country. This would be my final message.
Just a quick word on the skills issue. I think I endorse very much where the Prime Ministers are coming from, having been to each of these countries and seen the issues that they discussed. But let me highlight three things which I think we do need to work, we in EBRD, but also other international institutions and the private sector need to work on with these countries. One is actually businesses want to see, I think, a stronger commercial court system in many of these countries, because businesses need commercial courts to function well, to settle disputes and so on. And that's something that we're beginning to invest in these countries, but I think we need to do a lot more on the commercial court system. Secondly, this goes to the heart of, I think, the conversation that Prime Minister Rama had with Michael Barber. It's a bit like seeing my past before me here, Lord Maud and now Michael Barber. But Michael is very, well known in the world of delivery and implementation. And what struck me is actually not a lack of talent necessarily at all in these countries. What struck me is the question about education, how it has almost created a culture where civil servants, public servants, almost frightened of taking decisions at the right levels, frightened of looking at the options themselves, and pushed all decisions upwards. So it ends up with the senior politicians or their senior civil servants having to take all sorts of decisions that would normally be taken at different levels. So that is a big issue, I think, about how to shift the education culture, less drilling and more, willingness to actually look at options yourselves. I think that's a big piece of work to be done with these countries. Thirdly, I would say, I don't think there's any lack of an entrepreneurial talent or flair. I've talked to many businessmen in various tiers, large and small business. I think the biggest issue for me when I go around the region is at the SME level is how to turn very interesting entrepreneurial ideas into bankable propositions. And this is where I think the EBRD's work through our small business service in terms of advisory services, helping entrepreneurs build their business plans and put together investment ideas that are actually bankable, that the banks will actually finance, is, I think, a big part of what we have to do. Because for most of these economies, the SMEs actually is the backbone of the economy. So we have to do a lot more, I think, on that front too.
Thank you very much. And that was a fascinating